Okay, so let's check out what you guys were asking me about. This is a 10-sentence essay student example. Yes, I took the name off. And this is the 38, or the high C, that you guys wanted to know about and to see how I grade it. So let's start with the thesis. We have up here. So here's our thesis statement. And then what he has is, in What You Pawn, I Will Redeem by Sherman Alexie, the main character, Jackson Jackson, overcomes his inner conflict. So the first problem that we have is that in the thesis statement, he doesn't actually say what the inner conflict is. So without mentioning what it is, it's really hard to prove it in the essay. So right here, it should say his inner conflict of white culture versus native culture, or his inner conflict of lack of self-esteem, or his inner conflict of trying to belong in society. So from the very beginning, it's really difficult to prove this thesis statement because the inner conflict was never actually determined. So let's see how he tried. When the story begins, the author explains that our main character, Jackson Jackson, is a homeless Pocono Indian, which is a good fact, so we know a little bit about our main character, who has tried his whole life to build meaningful relationships. So you can see when I graded it the first time that I said, what's the proof of the fact that he tried to build these meaningful relationships? So to make a statement like this means that you would need to support it. So we know in the story that he tried to build meaningful relationships with Rosa Sharon and Irene and Honey Boy. And some of these items are discussed later, but what would be most important about these items is that they are meaningful, because that's the statement he makes here. So when our author writes, he flunked out of college, worked various jobs, married twice, and fathered 2 or 3 kids, all in an effort to build meaningful relationships with other people, I write the question mark. Why? Because how does flunking out of college and working various jobs and married twice and fathering 2 or 3 kids mean that he's building meaningful relationships? You might be able to use the married twice and the fathered 2 or 3 children in an effort to build meaningful relationships, but flunking out of college and working various jobs does not make a direct connection to building meaningful relationships. So everything has to be attached to this. So he continues on, still trying to prove that Jackson is conflicted. He wandered the streets with the regular crew, or so he called his friends Rosa Sharon and Junior. Although later, after a drinking session with his best friends, Rosa Sharon was gone, and a few hours after Rosa Sharon leaves, Jackson Jackson walks back to Junior and he's gone. But again, showing that they leave does not prove that he was trying to make meaningful relationships, which again looks like our author was trying to prove originally was his conflict. So just by saying that they leave him does not mean that he's building meaningful relationships. So the goal here is to show that they are meaningful relationships. So maybe that he buys them things, or that they have conversations that he cares about. Those would be part of the meaningful relationships. And then it says, as well, so his 2 most developed relationships left in a heartbeat. When Jackson Jackson stumbles into some money, he goes straight to Big Hearts in South downtown, where he proceeds to buy shots for all the people in the bar in another attempt to build a relationship. Well, first of all, we need to know what this bar is. This bar is not just a random bar. This is an Indian bar, so that matters, because that would prove that the shots are for individuals of his culture in order to build the meaningful relationships. So just making a point where he proceeds to buy shots for all the people in the bar does not prove that he's making meaningful relationships. We need to know that it's a native bar. And then also, when he moves into the Irene and Honey Boy idea, the only 2 people, Irene and Honey Boy, who develop some sort of relationship, but later he finds out they're gone. Again, I wrote down proof. You have to discuss that relationship, either the bathroom incident with Irene or the shots for Honey Boy or something proves that he tried to develop a meaningful relationship. Even when he tries to start a friendship with 2 Aleut men he meets, they wade into the water and disappear. Again, we have to prove that he tries to start a friendship. In other words, looking at the fact that he bought them breakfast, and that he hung out with them to prove the meaningful relationships. It all comes down in the end of the story when Jackson Jackson gets his grandmother's regalia back. Then he finds somewhere to fit in. CS just means comma splice, which means that he's separating 2 sentences with a comma. But in order to prove that he finds somewhere to fit in, you have to prove that he didn't fit in to begin with. That's what the whole idea of the meaningful relationships would be, or would need, is to prove that he tried to build them and couldn't, and that he didn't fit in. That's what the whole beginning of the essay would need to do. So when it says he finds somewhere to fit in, he wraps himself in his grandmother's regalia, and he danced with his grandmother. For this key moment in the story, he fit in with his ancestry and his family story. Again, I wrote proof. Because, first of all, there's been no mention earlier of him even trying to fit in with his ancestry. There's been no mention of him trying to find the regalia or anything like that. So you cannot just drop it in right at the end there and just say, by the way, for this moment he fits in. Because you have to establish him as an outsider first, and you need to do that by embedding quotations. So these are the reasons that the essay earned a 38, which was the average for everybody. So these are things to think about when you guys rewrite.